Hi everyone, it's Amy here, and today we are back for video number 9 in our Back to School Ready series. Today is a really good video because I'm going to be walking you through everything that I do on the first day of school, and I'm going to give you all the reasons why I do what I do on the first day, and then I'm also going to be giving you some insight as to what I do for the rest of the first week. Now I will say a couple of things here. Number one, this is just me, it's my teaching style, it's how I choose to do things, and hopefully it will give you some ideas about what to think about and what to do on the first day. But you do not need to run your day exactly like mine, although feel free if you would like to. If it sounds right to you, if it fits your teaching style, then go for it. No reason to reinvent the wheel. Also, if you want to take some things and tweak others, well that's more than fine. Do whatever floats your boat to get you through your first day at school. Also, I want to mention that depending on the calendar year and how things work out, sometimes our first week at school is like 3 days with the students and sometimes it's 5 days. So this year I do have 5 days with my students going back in the first week of school. So I am going to do a whole week, 5 days worth of walking you through what I do in the first week. But know that if I didn't have 5 days in the first week of school, then I would be condensing a lot of this down to 3 days, and then by week 2 I am getting into my normal routine and doing everything that I would normally do, which I talked about in my timetable video. So let's start off with prepping. Before I go back to school on the first day, I try and get as much prepped for my classroom as I can in terms of printing name labels and setting up worksheets and things like that I want for the first day or first week of school, but that's not always possible. In WA, we usually go back to school 2 days before the students for PD days, and sometimes our principals are nice enough to let us have some actual classroom time where we can actually prep things, and sometimes we're stuck in PD for the whole 2 days. Sometimes those 2 days are PD at other facilities, so we can't actually do anything in our room. And the other thing that really changes everything up is the fact of when do you get your class list with all your students' names on it, and when is that locked in place enough to actually start doing your classroom labels. So best case scenario, PD days are at school, and I try and do my desk arrangements, setting up the classroom during those days before we go to the PD, sometimes during my lunch and a little bit after school as well, or after the PD officially ends. That just leaves me waiting for the class list so I can do up things that involve name labels. Things that I like to do is a welcome thing on my door. I love to have the students' first and last names on my welcome sign, so it acts as a this is who is in my class checklist, rather than the A4 printout that you get where the parents are trying to look through going, is my kid in this class? I like to make my sign nice and big on A3 paper, the name's nice and big so the parents can see really quickly and easily if their child is in my room. So that poster I get done, and then I get some name labels done. So I need name labels for their trays, and I also need name labels for their desks just for the first day. I will talk about their desk tags in a minute and how I choose to do them, but I do need ones on the first day to tell students where to sit, and I will get into that and why I do desk name tags, assigned seating on the first day. Usually what happens though is we don't get the class list until like 3 o'clock on the day before we get the kids. So I come home usually after the PD day, I type up all the name labels. I already have like all of the documents ready, like I know what I want, it's all formatted, I've just got to write in the names, and then I'll print them off and laminate them. So usually I'm putting up the name tags on the first day of school, just like half an hour before the students walk through the door. So depending on how much I do is how early I get to school that morning. Generally speaking, I still only get there about 8 o'clock, which is 30 minutes before the door opens, but sometimes I will try and get in there a little bit earlier if I know that I have a lot to do that morning. So then I'm racing around putting name tags up, whether I'm blue tacking them on things or sticky taping them on things, I am getting all the name tags up. The other thing that I get ready when either that morning or during the PD days is lots of boxes for storing student items that I want to collect and I don't want them to keep. So I mentioned, I think it was in the first video I did in the series, that I collect all their glue sticks bar one, and this enables glue sticks to last for the entire year. Because what happens with a student is when they lose things for 2 seconds, they go, oh, I've got a big pack of them in my back tray, I'll just go and get another one. And I'm sorry, I refer to them as back trays. We called them back trays when I was in primary school because the back trays were always along the back wall. some people call them big trays. I don't know what most people call them. Whether you have cubby holes or whatever, the kids are going to go there and they're going to look for a supply there first, rather than actually having a good look through their pencil case or their little tray if they have one, or their big tray. They're just going to go and get the convenience factor. So by taking all of them away, you take that opportunity away from them, so they look a little bit harder. Also in my class, I have something called a borrowing box that I fill up with glue sticks and lead pencils and things like that. So if a student can't locate one of their items, or they never bought one to begin with, they can go to the borrowing box. It's just a free box that they can go to. They don't have to ask to go in there. They take something out with the expectation that when they finish using that item, that it goes back in the box. Now, obviously that doesn't always work out. The kids don't always put things back. Some of the items go missing, but at the end of the day, when you're cleaning up, if there's any items left on the floor and they don't have names on them, they go into the borrowing box. So it's kind of like a cyclic thing where it stocks itself up anyway. But yes, that's the borrowing box. I do have one in my classroom. I call it a box, but it's actually one of those tray systems. I think when I first did it, I actually used a box, and that's why I call it a box, but I really should get to calling it the borrowing tray, I think. So I set up a whole heap of containers with the items that I want to collect from students. Now, I have been in situations before. I think the first 3 years of my teaching career, I didn't have a book list. I wasn't given something that said this is exactly what your students are going to bring in. So I had to kind of fudge it a little bit and guess and assume what they might bring in and just have a setup for that. So what I usually collect from them is highlighters, glue sticks, PVA glue, art shirts, like the bigger things that I don't want in their trays, headphones, protractors. If you're in an older class, protractors get really easily broken in pencil cases, so I collect them. Compasses, students have a habit of wanting to destroy things with compasses, so I do collect them as well. Calculators, before iPads, when students used to bring calculators. This year I'm going to actually trial collecting some of their pencils. I haven't in the past, but I think that the time is right for that. And also in upper school, I'm now going to start collecting pens as well, because I've realized that by the end of the year, the students have destroyed most of their pens, even though we haven't been using them for like half a year. So I am going to be collecting them as well, so that I can give them out at the end of the year. And you also want to put those boxes all in one area if you can. You don't really want them in lots of locations around the classroom where the parents are trying to get around to everywhere. You want it in one location that has lots of room in front, so the parents can get up there, they can see the labels on them. Make sure you have big clear labels on them. I just use my labels that are always on the boxes for the entire year, or the containers, whatever you're using to store the items in. Just use the ones that you're going to be using for the rest of the year if you can. Nice big labels on them so the parents can just go and put them in. Oh, another couple of things that I collect too are their art liners and their permanent markers, because if they keep them in their pencil case, they use them for silly things and then they don't actually work well when you actually need to use them. The other thing that I like to have ready is a note on their desk that tells the student, welcome to my classroom, and then here's what you can do with all of your supplies. Here's what you can put in your pencil case. Here's what you can put in your big tray. Here's what you can put in your desk tray. Here's what you need to go and find storage containers for. The reason I like to have one on the desk is because I've trialed many other approaches in my teaching career. In the first year, I tried a big note up on the whiteboard. In my second year, I tried multiple notes around the classroom, including hanging signs. And what I realized was that while it looks really clear to me when I'm the only person in the classroom, once you get all the students in and their mum and sometimes their dad and then other siblings and sometimes even their grandparents, you can't see any of those signs around the classroom. So by having one on their desk that clearly says what you want done with everything, all the kids are clear about it, all the parents are clear about it, and everything just runs a little bit smoother. So in their pencil case, I usually put in obvious things like 2 lead pencils, an eraser, a sharpener, a ruler, a glue stick, and scissors. Sometimes there might be 1 or 2 other things depending on your school and what your school has asked for. In their desk tray, I usually ask for 3 exercise books because they're the 3 main ones that I use with my students. And then I tell them to put certain things in containers around the room, and then I tell them to put everything else in their big tray. And by telling them to put everything else, it covers you for any parents that have maybe an alternative book list because they came from a different school, so they have extra things. Or it also covers you if you're in a situation where you don't actually know what the book list was and what the students were expected to bring in. So let's say, for example, you weren't expecting them to bring in scrapbooks. by just saying "and everything else" into their big tray, they're going to go put all their scrapbooks in their big tray, and then later on when you're sitting with your students you can work out what they've got and then decide what you're going to do with different items that you maybe weren't expecting. And if there's containers up there with something written on them and the students didn't actually have to bring that in, well, that's alright. As soon as you realise that the first few parents don't have that item, you can just kind of tuck it away and no one will be the wiser, it will all be fine. So once everything is ready, it's time to open the door, and make sure you check with your principal or teachers next door about what time you can open your door. You want to try and keep it consistent with the rest of the school. It's not great if one teacher's opening really early and then another one's not. It just doesn't look great and parents can get upset about that. So it's better to kind of have just an even footing with everybody else, open the doors at the same time. Once I open my door, I do stop a group of people individually. So every student, I say, "Hi, I'm Mrs. O'Grady, who are you?" Once they tell me their name, I do repeat it back to them. So I say, "Hi Jasmine, I'm so excited to have you in my class this year." And by repeating it back to them, the more you use their name, the more likely it is to stick in your head. I then address the parents and I say, "Hi, I'm Amy, it's a pleasure to meet you." I think I might have talked about this in the parent video. I kind of feel like addressing them separately just makes them feel a bit more comfortable, makes it a little bit more personable, and makes you seem maybe a little bit more approachable. But again, it's up to you whether you use your first name with the parents. You definitely don't have to. I then direct them into the classroom, and I try really hard when I'm putting out the desk tag names to try and remember where a lot of them are so that I can point them in the direction. So I can say, "Oh Jasmine, I think you're down the back there somewhere." You know, you don't have to have memorized it, so you can tell them, "Oh, you're right there in that seat right there." But having a bit of an idea about where they are just kind of makes the flow of the classroom go smoother, so people aren't doing bog laps trying to find their name. That's another reason why I was talking about at the start doing desk tags, just a little label to tell people where their child is sitting. It just makes things a little bit easier and helps people with anxiety because there is a place for them to go to and they're not trying to pick, "Oh, where should I sit and who's here and who's not here." I just think it goes a bit smoother if you're actually telling students to sit somewhere specific on the first day of school. So as they come in, I address the next group, and you do get a bit of a queue at first and you can kind of feel a bit pressured, like, "Oh, there's so many people that I've got to get in." But take the time, it is worth it, it is okay. What you'll find is a big cluster will come in straight away and then you'll just get dribs and drabs. You'll also find that there are some parents that want to come up and speak to you and let you know about individual things to do with their students. So like, this person needs to be let go to the toilet whenever they ask, or this person has asthma and they have a puffer in their bag. Try and keep those conversations brief. Show that you're interested in what they have to say and that you respect their concerns. But if it sounds like there's a lot of stuff there and you feel like you're going to get bogged down in a conversation where you've got other people to go and meet, just say something like, "I'd be happy to discuss this in a meeting with you." And if you can, give them a time or a date. Say, "I'm free tomorrow after school, does that suit you?" Or if there's anything pertinent that you really want me to know, feel free to send me an email and I'll read it during my dot time today. So don't be afraid to shut parents down, because you've only got a limited amount of time with your students on the first day to get everybody in and settled before the bell goes, or at least at my school I only have 10 minutes. One of the other things I do is on that note that I put on the student's desk, at the bottom it says, "Once you put everything away, feel free to chat to your friends or turn this over and do a word search of all of the students' names who are in your classroom." And I find that's really great because some class dynamics are really different. Some kids are going to really want to go and talk to their friends that they haven't seen all summer. Others are just going to want to kind of sit at their desk and just kind of process everything. So having something that they can do so they're not just sitting there going like this is really, really great. And it also, I think, helps parents leave a little bit easier because they see their child is settled and doing a task. And then as soon as the bell goes, so my bell goes at 8:40, I say something to address the whole class to help the parents make an exit. So something like, "Okay guys, say goodbye to your parents now, it's time to get started on our day." If you find that there's some parents still lurking around, just try and think about whether it's okay with them being there or not. So for example, if it's a parent who maybe came in later with their student and they're just trying to do the last of those putting away things, then that's okay, just let them do that, they'll leave soon enough. However, if you feel like the parent is hovering and not wanting to leave, which in my experience has never happened, but if that does, just do something like, "Hey Tommy, can you say goodbye to your mum now, she needs to leave," and try and make it a little bit more like specific to that person who isn't leaving, but in a nice way. Again though, I've never had that in my entire career, so if it happens, it is extremely rare. As soon as all the parents have left, or most of them have left, I welcome my students to the classroom and I tell them how we're going to be saying good morning every morning. I hate the whole good morning, Mrs. I hate that with a passion. It makes me cringe. So in my very first year out, I knew that I wanted just everybody to say good morning at the same time, because I feel like if I'm doing my job in the morning really well, I've already said good morning to most of the students one-on-one, and why can't we say good morning to everybody? So I just count 1, 2, 3, and then the whole class says good morning everyone. It's nice, it's quick, and I can control the speed because I'm saying it with them. Of course, if you don't want to do that, if you want to do the chant, go for it. If you want a welcome song, go for it. Whatever makes you happy and makes you feel like that atmosphere of the classroom is starting to come together. Once I've done that, I tell the students a little bit about me, because obviously they're all in this classroom with me. Some of them might not know me from anything, so I just go through some basic facts about me and maybe some interesting little tidbits. So I tell them that I'm married to my high school sweetheart. I tell them that I've got 2 little daughters. I tell them, well, this year I'll say that I have 1 dog, which is a bit sad. And yeah, just telling them some facts about me, that I grew up in Bunbury, that I've been teaching at my school for 8, 9 years now. I'll have to work that out before I tell them. But I think it just makes the start of that relationship really nice and gives us something to relate to, because some of them are going to pick up on some of the things I say and go, oh, me too. Obviously not to the husband and the kids, but to other little facts that I tell them about myself, like things that I'm interested in and that I like. Once I've done that, I usually do the roll. So I just go through, I call out the student's name and they say here. And again, I try and repeat the student's name back to them when they say it. When they say they're here, I go, oh yep, you're Jasmine, because I'm really trying to learn their names as quickly as possible, because that is a nice thing to do. Obviously, some people choose to use name tags, and that's fine if you want to stick a name tag on your students. Once I've done the roll, I usually jump straight into a get to know you activity. So I get all the students to stand or sit in a circle, and I do my name is. And it starts off by the first person saying my name is Amy, and then the next person goes her name is Amy and my name is Cody, and then the next person does the previous 2. Really love that game. Works great in a small class, but when you do get a larger class, what I usually do is every like 5 to 10 people, I start it again, and I say you don't need to rename all of those people back at the start unless you want a real challenge. And the reason I do that is because it just takes a really long time. You don't want any of the students to get anxious if they're waiting for their turn and they're one of the last people and they're fretting about trying to remember everybody else's name. But at the same time, a lot of those students already know each other, so they already know all of their names and they can fly through them anyway. So just doing it in kind of like 5 to 10 people stints is fine. Then after that, we do our classroom rules and our expectations. So I go through with them and do a bit of a brainstorm about what do you think some of our classroom rules should be? What do you think we need to know in this classroom? And depending on what age they are, they've usually done this a fair few times, so a lot of the rules come very, very natural to them. And I did speak about it in one of my other videos, in the behaviour management videos, how a lot of the rules end up being the same from year to year. But basically I do a big brainstorm up on the board first, and then we start trying to pull them into rules, and we frame those rules in the positive. Once we've got all the rules down pat, I say that I'm going to go home and then I'm going to type those up and put them on the wall. As I spoke about in my behaviour management video, my school is a PBS school, so we have a matrix of behavioural expectations across the school. So I think this year I'm going to do my classroom rules a little bit different. I think I'm going to show students the behaviour matrix, which they're already very familiar with, and I'm going to ask them to go through it and pick out the behaviours on the matrix that would make good classroom rules that we want to focus on to make our classroom a safe and supportive environment for the students. So I'll let you know how that goes, but that's my approach for this year. As soon as we've done the classroom rules, which I try to keep as brief as possible, but usually runs about 20 minutes, I then go straight into another get to know you game. And the other one I really like is 2 truths and a lie. So have students sit down and think of them first. For younger students, ask them maybe to write them down and try really hard to tell them not to do the 2 truths first and then the lie, because a lot of students go 2 truths and a lie, and then that's the order they say it in, and it kind of gives it away. But it's just a fun little game where they can make up something crazy about themselves, and then they mingle around the room. They partner up with somebody when you say stop or when the music stops, however you choose to do your mingle, and they tell the other student their 2 truths and a lie, and that person has to pick out which one is the lie. What I like to do is go around and actually do it with the students as well, and I try to pick out the outlier students who are not interacting as much because they're a little bit more shy, and I definitely don't have an expectation that every single person is sharing every single time. If I look around and somebody hasn't partnered up, I'm not going to force them. It's the first day of school. I want them to relax a little bit, so if they want to become wallflowers for a minute, then that's okay. Then the next activity I do is desk tags. So I told you before that when the students come in, I do have a little desk tag on their desk. It's just a little one that I then go and use on other displays, like my reading groups display, because I like students to make up their own desk tag. I use the size of an A4 piece of paper folded in half and then half again lengthways as name tags in upper primary, and in lower primary it's usually an A4 piece of paper folded in half lengthways, and that's quite a big one. I ask them to write their name in lead pencil first, and I check to make sure that their writing is coherent, like you can actually see it really well, and that it is big enough on their name tag. Once that's done, they take their permanent marker and they write over their name tag, and then, you know, decorate it, draw pictures on it, whatever they want. And I also let them pick the color that they do their name tag on, so that that space on their desk becomes theirs as much as it possibly can. It belongs to them. I then take those name tags home that night and I laminate them and bring them back the next day so that they just last the whole entire year long. Also, if you are ever going to be a person who leaves a gap around something when you laminate it, do it for name tags, because there will be times when students spill their drink bottle on their desk or spill something on their desk, and if you've got that gap around it, it makes it even more waterproof and less likely to peel up, so it is worth the extra gap around. After that, I then get into their belongings. I leave it for a bit later on because I want to kind of settle them first. I don't want to do all the boring stuff first up. So we look at what's in their pencil case and we check that they've only got the things that were on that note. We then check their back trays or their big trays, their cubby holes, whatever you want to call it, and make sure that they don't have anything in there that's meant to be in containers around the room. So I'll pick up the glue stick container and I'll say, does anybody have any more glue sticks? And I just check that everybody doesn't have anything on them that they're not meant to, that's meant to be collected. Now, I had a question the other day about whether you should track your students and what they have brought in and what they don't have. I don't tend to do any like formal thing for that, because I've got the borrowing box where they know they can go to borrow anything if they need. It's not really pertinent that they have all of their own stuff. If a student comes in with nothing on the first day, then I kind of sneak over and I give them a few things so they don't feel like they have to keep getting out of their seat to go and get things. But that only usually happens to 1, maybe 2 students a year, so it's not hard to manage or hide from the rest of the class, and the rest of the class is off doing their own things, so they're not really worried too much about everybody else. They don't really notice. In terms of exercise books and that, if the students don't have it on the first day, I just give them an exercise book from the class. If they end up bringing in exercise books later on, then I take their exercise books, I put them in the cupboard, and I use them for the next year. Often though, if a student comes in with nothing on the first day, they're usually not going to bring anything in. The parent might tell you stories like, oh, we just moved and the stuff is still at our other house, or I'm going to go and get it this afternoon. Most of those parents will never follow through on that for whatever reason. They won't bring the things in, so I don't tend to follow up on it. I don't pressure the parents about it. There's usually a reason why they haven't brought it in. It's usually money related, so I just don't go down that track. So I make sure that everything is where it's meant to be, that I've collected everything that I need. I do find that in my big collection bins that there is a lot of stuff that is often not named, even though on my sheet I ask them that all the stuff that they put in the bin, in the storage containers, are labelled. A bunch of things won't be. So at different points during the week, I do go through the things and try to find the ones that don't have labels on them and try to pinpoint the kids who they might belong to. You can do that by like going through painstakingly and going, okay, I've got one for this student and this student and this student and this student. Okay, so who's left over? Who thinks they brought one in? But that can just single out the kids a little bit more and attract attention to the fact that they didn't bring something in. So usually I just leave it, and those ones that don't have names on it just become the ones that go into the borrowing box for people to borrow. While I do that, I also get their 3 exercise books ready. I have one for spelling, one for maths, and one for reading. So what I like to do is color code my books with just a dot at the top corner. So like reading might be blue and maths might be red, and spelling might be orange. And it just makes it really easy when students are trying to go through their books and find out which one they need, especially in the younger years where they can't read as well. They can just see that dot, and it's really, really quick and easy to make sure that they have the right book. Especially if students have covers on their books where they can't write on them to label them. After we've arranged all of their stuff and got it all to the right place, we play another game because I love to break up the first day of all those mundane things with some fun games. So the next game I play is Time Ball, which is where all the students stand up around the classroom. We have a soft ball that we throw. As soon as the first student has thrown it, I press start on a timer and I time how long it takes them to pass to every single person in the classroom, and they do have to use the student's name. So before they pass, they say, "Oh, Amy," and then they pass to that person. If they don't know their name, then they have to ask. They have to say, "Oh, sorry, what's your name?" and then say their name and then pass it to them. And I play that game multiple times over the course of the first few weeks of school to see if they can increase their time as they get to know each other better and as they start to work out different strategies in that game to actually make it go quicker. By that stage, it's usually recess. Now, if I haven't managed to get through everything in the morning that I wanted to, I will do some of it after recess, but generally I find that that amount of things just takes up 2 hours and that it just flows nicely, and usually recess goes straight after Time Ball. Another thing I like to do during my first week is actually keep my timetable roughly the same as it would normally be. So I always do maths after recess. So after recess, I do a maths all about me activity, which is just a simple one, which is called My Life in Numbers. The students draw a little picture of themselves in the center and they write their name, and then they divide their page into, they just divide the rest of their page with lines going out, and each one of those sections needs to be a number about them. So they might put 9, my age, and they might put a picture in there. If you were in an upper class, you can make that slightly more difficult by saying you can't actually write the number, so instead it's 5 plus 4 equals my age. And so they just go around that. The higher achievers are going to divide it into more sections so they can do more numbers, but have a minimum. So if you're lower primary, I'd do 4. For upper primary, I'd have like minimum of maybe 7. I don't usually do a performer for it because if I did, it would mean I'd have to get to the photocopier to print it all and get it all ready, and it's just one less thing I can worry about if I just get the students to make up their own template. And I've said before that like it's fine for students to make up their own template. It might not look as neat as if you had printed it yourself, but I think that's fine. If I do get time to go to the photocopier, sometimes I'll do it, sometimes I won't. It is an activity that I can prep in the previous year at the end of the year if I've gotten organised enough and I want to, so it really depends on the year. We usually do Time Ball in there again. It usually takes us up to lunchtime because they're colouring in their sheet, and by that stage they're pretty much exhausted. And then after lunch, I usually just follow the routine on my timetable. So if my timetable said that it was health, we would do a health lesson after lunch. If it was HASS, I would do a HASS lesson after lunch. I would tone it back a lot, I would simplify it a lot and make it a lot easier on the students, not expect too much of them, but I would still do my usual routine. After lunch, I would just follow my usual routine. So if I had health after lunch, I would do a health lesson. If I had HASS after lunch, I'd do a HASS lesson. Now, if it's a lesson that I feel like would just be a bit too much for them on the first day, so let's say in my persuasive writing unit, which I do with my year 5s in the first term, the first lesson is them doing a writing sample of a persuasive writing text. That would be very, very cruel to get them to do on the first day, so I would swap to another get to know you activity. So some fun ones you can do is if you have access to iPads, you can ask them to do a pic collage of things about them, things that they like. I used to love doing this because then I would get them to put a graphic over the top of their name, and then they would save that and make that as their lock screen for their iPad, or sometimes I would print them off to decorate the room. Unfortunately, our iPads don't come into our school until like the 2nd or 3rd week of school. I can't use them on the first day, so I can't do that activity anymore. Another one I used to do with lower primary was a little house where the doors opened up and inside they drew a picture of their family, because that was a really good way to get to see, you know, whether they have siblings or not, and whether they're the eldest or the youngest, and whether their parents are living together or separated, whether they have an extended family that live with them. You could see a lot from doing that. Another one you might want to do is some graphing activities. So like how many siblings do you have, and graph that. Or another one is just a holiday recount. So just make it really, really simple. One of the ones I do is a glasses template. So on one side it has a picture of glasses and they draw a picture of something they saw on their holidays. Some students do it like, because there's two lenses, you could do two different pictures. Some students just spread it over the top. And then on the back, they write down what they did on the holiday. And there's no expectations of how much they will write. It's just, you know, they write, they draw a picture, you're done, and you can decorate it around the room. Again, I'm breaking the day up with games. Usually by that point, we're just keeping on doing time ball to just break up little bits of time. So again, as we're doing all that in the afternoon, we're breaking things up with games. Usually it's just time ball, but sometimes I might introduce them to other games that I have if I feel like they're getting a bit bored, or I might take them outside if I feel like, especially if there's a lot of boys in the class, if maybe they just need to run it out a little bit. In that case, I love to play a game called Everyone's It. You set up an area marked maybe by cones, or if you don't have cones, you can just use things in the landscape like that tree to that tree to that tree to that tree. Students all run around, they're all it. You say ready, set, go, and on go anyone can tag anyone. If you get tagged, you sit down. Once you sit down, you can still reach out and tag other people, but you can't get off of your bottom. Once you're down, and then it's basically last person standing. And I love that as an alternative to a normal chasey, because it's not necessarily the student that you would think that always wins it, because they can be a little bit sneaky and kind of like stay back from the crowd. And of course, everybody's running around, everybody's active. That usually ends my day. The last thing I do with the students after I stack and pack is just kind of have a quick little reflection with them about how they feel like their first day went. Was there anything they were excited about? Is there anything that they're looking forward to? And just kind of have a little debrief with them if they're willing to share, and kind of make sure that they have a couple of things in their head that they can talk to their parents about, because you know their parents are going to ask them, oh, what did you do today? And having a couple of things prepared in their head can really help with that. One thing that I forgot that I also do on the first day is in the morning, just after I've done the roll, is that I check if there are any new students to the school and check if they need to go on a tour. So if they haven't been on a tour like that morning, that day, I will send some other student who knows the area out with them to go and do a walk around and show them all the key places like toilets and drink fountains. If I am in a grade 1 class, I'll actually take the whole class out and I'll do a whole school tour with them just to remind them, here's where the toilets are, here are where the drink fountains are, because in pre-primary in our school they are in just one certain area, and while they do walk the school and they do get a bit of an idea about where things are, it can just alleviate a lot of their anxieties if they just are reminded where the main things are again, so they can get their bearings again. So as I said in my diagnostic assessment video, I try not to do any key assessments in the first 2 days because the results aren't going to be very accurate. However, usually on the second day, I want to start trying to get my literacy rotations up, so I do that reading assessment that I was talking to you about, where I'm just trying to do a quick assessment to gauge where they are up to and what reading groups that I might put them in. And then for the rest of that week, I look at my timetable and I try and align things as best as I can to what is usually on my timetable. So I'm doing maths during maths, I'm doing literacy during literacy, I'm doing reading during reading time, I'm doing HASS during HASS, but things might be a little bit simplified, a little bit easier, but trying to start all of my units as quickly as I can after the third day of school. So third day of school, I'm starting all my usual programs. Literacy rotations are up and running. They're not refined, but I'm getting into the class procedures of how things work. Oh, that's another thing that I forgot. There's so much. On the first day of school, another thing that I will go through is the timetable. So directly after the roll, I will go through the timetable with them and talk about, okay, here's where you've got science, here's where you've got art, here's where you've got phys ed, so you need to remember to bring special shoes for that. You've got senior sport on this day, so you need to wear your faction shirt and appropriate shoes. Here's the day where we have library, so you need to bring along your library book, your library bag. So I do go through the timetable with them. I, in my classroom, have a weekly timetable that's always up on the board so students can see it nice and clearly what we're doing, and I think it settles a lot of the students in if they know exactly what they're going to be doing during the week. As I said in my behaviour management video, every single day of the first week I do go through the classroom rules again. I reset my expectations, I tell them exactly what I expect from them in the classroom, and then I follow through on that even in the first week if the students aren't focusing on them. Remember, in your first week, it's not necessarily about getting new content across, it's just about establishing your routines and your procedures. So as soon as I start literacy groups, as I said in my behavior management video, I am not really focused on the group that's with me and teaching them anything. It's about the rest of the students in the classroom and making sure they're on task, they know what they need to be doing, and that I'm teaching them how I want them to be, so that when I do start teaching content in the group that's with me, I don't have to worry about the rest of the class. And that's for a lot of other things as well. So on day 3 or 4, when I've done my initial placement test for my spelling program, I'm sitting there with the students and I am walking them explicitly through every single part of my spelling routine to make sure that they're doing it properly. I do look, cover, write, check with my students, but we all know that look, cover, write, check isn't effective if they're not doing some of like the visualizing in their heads and actually thinking about things. So I walk them through the steps of this is what you should be doing during this part, this is what you should be doing during this part, to make sure that that program is going to be as effective as possible. When I do a writing activity, if the expectation is to rule up, then I am taking the time during that first week to explicitly show them, how do I want them to rule up? How do I want them to hold the ruler so that it doesn't go squiff? Where do I want them to put the date? Where do I want to put the header? It's not about teaching them content, it's about teaching them the routines and the expectations for your classroom and setting them up for future success. Being in your classroom in the first week of school can be a whirlwind experience. There is just so much going on, so many things that you need to get ready, that I feel like even in this video I'm probably forgetting half of the things that I do during that first week, and I probably won't remember them until I'm in the classroom actually doing them. But a couple of things, a couple of tips. Number 1, if you're a new grad and you're nervous about your first day, deep breath. Here's a fact. We're all nervous on our first day. It's all a bit nerve-wracking. We're all so excited to meet our new students, but at the same time, we're just a bundle of nerves as well, and hoping that it all runs smoothly and that we haven't forgotten anything too major. And if we have forgotten anything, well, just apologize. For the last 2 years in a row, I have had a very, very bad mishap where I've taken the students' name tags home to label, and laminate, before I've actually managed to put them through the laminator machine, I have spilled water on them. 2 years in a row I have done that, so I've had to go back the next day to the students and apologize to them for wrecking some of their name tags. One of the years that I did it, I apologized to the students and they looked at them and it had this really cool watercolor effect that had happened when the textures had bled. They loved it. They kept the laminated versions of them and they used them on their desk all year. So if you make a mistake, if you mess something up, it's okay, just breathe, try again the next day. What I do recommend is if you are a new grad, before you go into your first day, rehearse it a little bit. Think about what are you going to say to the students. Act it out a little bit in your head about here I'm going to go here and then I'm going to do this and then I'm going to go there. There's no reason why we can't practice for a performance just like actors do and things like that. I hope this video has helped you a little bit. I am going to link my timetable up above for the last few years about what I have done. You'll notice sometimes they're not well planned out, like it's just a couple of keywords. Sometimes it's a bit more than that. You might notice in the last few years that I might have broken some of the things that I've told you about today, like don't do assessments within the first week of first 2 days of school, and maybe you'll see an assessment on like the second day. There's usually a reason that I did it that way, or it's something that I've learned from. I did it and I regretted it and I've learned from it. I'll catch you guys tomorrow. Bye!